Members, we might go to local board input on Unlock Avondale, which is item 12. Are either Tracy or Susan here at this stage? Not? Then we will take that input at the item. I have no extraordinary business notified under 7, no notices of motion under 8. And now we'll go to the Auckland Plan refresh, which is on page 9. Members, we've considered this at, I think, workshops on the 15th of February, the 1st of March, the 15th of March, and you can see the supporting documents as attachments E, G, and J. E, page 139, G, 233, and J, 315. So we have a report, we have supporting documentation that helps inform our consideration and decisions here today. Welcome, Jacques and Denise. Do I have a question at this stage from... no, later on.
I'll let them go first.
So I was just, as directed, we haven't got a presentation. I was just going to make a few brief points. The Auckland Plan sets a long-term strategic direction for Auckland's growth and development, integrating social, economic, environmental and cultural objectives. The current plan has provided direction in significant areas, including the Unit 2 plan. It has shortcomings with which the refresh will address. We are recommending option 2 outlined in the report, a streamlined spatial approach to address these shortcomings and ensure that the plan's strategic direction is updated for the future. Option 2 provides for the setting of the high-level objectives across the 4 wellbeings, and by structuring the plan around a small number of themes that address Auckland's biggest challenges, it will ensure the plan is strategic and well integrated across these objectives. It will be high level. Option 2 is proposing high level and not provide large volume of detailed information or initiatives. It includes a high level development strategy which is core to the ability of the plan to provide the coordinating function that the legislation requires. So this option most closely aligns to the legislation. The costs for each option are set out in the report. Option 2, estimated at 2.69 to 3.42 million, is the least expensive of the options, and it includes budgeted internal staff costs. Other costs are around consultation engagement and the digital plan. The stakeholders, as you know, are defined in the legislation. They include communities of Auckland, infrastructure providers, central government and others. The stakeholders need to be engaged throughout the development of the plan, and we're proposing the first key point of engagement to follow the April Planning Committee workshops over the next couple of weeks, so in May, June. With respect to the communities of Auckland, we're proposed to carry out some surveys in addition to holding workshops with community stakeholders, and we'll also work with advisory panels to identify those stakeholders. For other groups, we will try where possible to use existing forums and set up dedicated events if required. For Mana Whenua, we've received some initial direction at a hui that was held last Monday, 20th of March, and we are seeking further feedback from all Mana Whenua chairs, including those who went in attendance at the hui before proceeding. For Matawaka, we have identified potential stakeholder groups and are looking at options for engaging. What we're trying to do there is work with the organisation to reduce multiple contacts and engagement hui. We'll have possible approaches for engaging with Mana Whenua and Matawaka firmed up in the next few weeks, and would appreciate the opportunity to share that with IMSB and seek their feedback on that approach. Feedback that we'll receive during the period of engagement with stakeholders, we'll provide back to the Planning Committee, and it will be used to inform the drafting of the plan. But we will be engaging with stakeholders at a staff level throughout the development of the plan from now through to October. And then the formal consultation will take place at the same time as the LTP in early next year. Just to note that events may be aligned with the LTP consultation, but documentation must be kept separate. But where we can align, it will provide for more efficient use of resources. So we're seeking the following decisions from you today as outlined in the report: to approve option 2, approve the approach for early engagement with the communities of Auckland and for engagement with our other key partners and stakeholders, and approve the use of the special consultative procedure on the draft plan in early 2018.
Thank you, Denise. Jacques, anything to add at this time?
Nope.
Happy to take questions. I will move the recommendations A, B, C and D, and I have a second from the Deputy Chair, Councillor Denise Lee. So it's on the table. Members, questions? Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair. I'm generally supportive of option 2. I think this is massively, massively important to update, and so much things have changed. But I do have one question around one point in option 2, which says removes all other material in existing plan. I mean, I saw this as sort of like an additional plan or an updated version, but not to remove the tons and tons of work that was done those years ago. I know we have concerns about printing a massive, massive document and all that sort of thing, but removing stuff just doesn't make a lot
Councillor
of
Hills,
sense.
maybe if we can know the context, if you can bring us to that particular reference point, page and
It's
paragraph.
the 8th bullet point on the recommendation, option 2. Down the bottom it says, note...
What page?
Page.
Sorry, it's just
13.
13, it's the main recommendation.
Top of page 13.
Oh, you mean the option 2 is recommended?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, the top there, right.
Okay, thank you. So just
Sorry about that.
reading that is a summary of everything that we've had explained to us in the supporting workshops. So there is some brevity in that, but this has been backgrounded before. But really happy, Jacques, if you can explain your brevity there and what it includes, excludes.
I suppose in essence what that is saying is that the refresh plan needs to be a high level, needs to give high level direction across the 4 well-beings. What that little bit means is the more detailed stuff that isn't quite appropriate to sit in the plan because it is kind of a more shorter term nature, that will be removed. We won't repeat that kind of thing in the plan again.
So, and to add to that, removed, it then exists in some of the other plans that sit
That's what I was-
below
okay.
that.
Ah,
So
yeah,
it
yeah.
doesn't go away.
Yeah, that's what I thought.
It's
was
not
thrown
gone.
in. Yeah. Thank
Just
you.
doesn't sit in there.
Thank you. Councillor Hulse?
Thank you. So following on from that, I think we both sort of had the same kind of question. So I'm speaking to, on page 23, the fold-out page, talking about the legislative requirements. So it meets the legislative requirements with regard to social, environmental, economic and cultural objectives. So I'm understanding that during the refresh process, we go back and we say, if we look at spatial plans, how much do we want to improve water quality by? How much would we expect to see an improvement in South and West Auckland in, various social measurements? How much would we expect to reforest our urban areas? We must have those kind of targets in there. And I guess my understanding is that this is where the priority setting will re-happen in the plan once we've talked to our community, refreshed our current information that guides this, and that this will be the plan that sets those targets in preparation for our long-term budget, which will then work out how we pay to do those things. Am I correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me use an example of the water quality. So what the plan will do, where that water, so setting the high level direction across the 4 well-being, so including environmental, where achieving that direction is, let's say, done through physical infrastructure. Let's say the central interceptor. I would expect that to be in the development strategy part of the plan because that is such a big, costly, long-term. So you would expect that to see. Other programs that you might initiatives that you might start to improve water quality, you may not see the detail of that in the plan, but the direction has been given, and therefore it then becomes part of the work programs of committees in the organisation to determine what best way to go about that, rather than specify that in the plan, because that initiative might be a 3 to 5 year initiative, and then it changes thereafter, whereas, let's say, the Central Interceptor is a 30-year, or in that case, it's probably 100 years. But yeah, and that's the difference. It is really a difference, a level of detail. What is appropriate to have as the 30 years? What are the things that you adapt more often, and therefore it sits better outside the plan, but the direction has been given in the plan.
Okay, and option 2 delivers
That's what
enough
option 2
information
does.
to do that.
Yep.
Perfect. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Very, very good point to make. I have Megoff.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I support option 2 as against the other options that are put up, but the question that I have, since we're looking at, picking up from where Councillor Hulse was talking, we're looking at some really expensive infrastructure that we'll need over this period of time. To what extent will the plan, the updated plan, tackle the challenge of the need for alternative revenue sources for an internationally sized city that is forecast to continue to grow rapidly?
So to some extent, that is a decision that this committee needs to make. I would imagine at minimum the Auckland plan needs to talk about the issue. It also probably needs to talk about what some of those alternative sources might be. Whether it goes into the detail as the final or the solutions to all of that, that is a political decision. It might be that the detail of that and how exactly you would fund X, Y, and Z project in the future, that might be more appropriate for the long-term plan to deal with that issue. But certainly I would imagine the Auckland plan would at least deal with the concept and that alternative funding is needed, and here might be some of the ways that you do it.
Thank you.
But that's a decision that committee will make.
My second question is that since this is a plan that looks beyond a long-term plan, to what extent are you going to tackle, we've had the issue here this morning, for example, the long-term needs of Auckland in regard to location of its port, or the long-term needs of Auckland as it grows by 1 million more people for sporting facilities and stadia. They are beyond the 10-year period. Is it your intention that the long-term plan, the Auckland plan would tackle some of those questions?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the biggest drivers of the Auckland plan would be the population growth and all the things that then goes with that, whether that's hard infrastructure, facilities, etc. Again, I think it comes down to a level of detail. One would stay at the higher level. If it is really big facilities, I would imagine that would be in the Auckland plan. But the network of detail, I'm just going to say public open space, I don't see that being in the plan. The plan would probably give very strong direction about what that network needs to achieve, but I don't think it would have the detail. But if the council, again, so to some extent that is a political decision, if the council decides that it is going to deal with the port issue and that the port is moving, then that will have to be dealt with in the Auckland plan. It may not have all the answers on that, but it at least must look at the different scenarios and what that might mean and what that future might be.
Thank you.
Thank you, Megoff. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. My question is about what we're looking at now compared to what was presented in the workshops. So in the workshop discussion, there weren't going to be any targets in this refresh plan. There was going to be a reliance on the long-term plan around that. So my first question is, are we still doing it that way, or are we changing?
What we are proposing is that the new Auckland plan shouldn't have targets. It should have indicators and it should have measures that are tied to those high-level strategic directions. So the way we decide what long-term, where the city needs to go. and again, as I said, across the social, environmental, cultural, and economic domains. But the proposal is we stick in the Auckland plan to indicators and to measures. The targets, one of the problems we have with the targets at the moment is a lot of those targets are 30-year targets, and it gets really hard to measure them in between because there is nothing in between. Again, you may also tactically, things change as you go along, and that's why we say it is far better to have a 10-year target, you break it into the 3 decades, and let the Auckland plan achieve that, the long-term plan, achieve that target.
So my follow-on question is, how are Aucklanders going to relate to a plan that doesn't have any targets, that becomes, I would suggest, quite vacuous? How are they going to know what Auckland is going to look like?
So, Councillor, I think the explanation between targets and indicators and the measurability of those indicators has just been explained. But are you suggesting you don't understand the reason for not having targets and having indicators? Because we've had confirmation that we have indicators, and that rather than measure or trying to measure something out 30 years, the intention is to measure in interim periods. So,
and I guess my concern is that Aucklanders aren't going to relate to that. They'll have some difficulty. So let me just leave that. My conclusion is that's a significant deficiency. The other question I've got, given the dynamic pace of change that we're going to be seeing, and I could indicate what a number of those things are, what kind of scenario approach are you going to take? Are you going to present different scenarios within plan? For example, we could have and will have another global financial crash at some point. We've got climate change that is looming, sea level rise that's accelerating. There are uncertainties within certainties. So are you taking a scenario approach?
I think you're mainly referring to probably the development strategy component of the plan. And in approaching the development strategy, we have certainly looked at 3 scenarios, and that's work that we would do with the committee as we develop the plan, but we certainly looked at 3 different scenarios. And of that, we recommend what the best of the 3 scenarios for Auckland's future growth over the 30 years might be. I think things like another global financial crisis, I don't think that necessarily changes the way that the city would grow. What it does change would be the rate at which it grows. And like you said before, that rate might slow down. The effect of that is that it doesn't necessarily change the package of, I'm just going to use infrastructure. It doesn't change the package of infrastructure that you need to accommodate those people. It does change the timing in which you might need it. Okay. So it might set that back much more.
If I can bring this question to some focus, there are particular scenarios around finance. We know that if we do not have some financial solutions, that we simply cannot do things. Everything stops. So are we going to have some financial scenarios around alternative funding tools, for example?
I suppose that's partly similar to the question that the Mayor asked. I think the plan needs to deal with some of those potential options, what some of those scenarios are, but I'm not so sure that the plan needs to land every answer over a 30-year period within the plan.
So, given that...
Sorry, you've asked 4
questions. My last question, given that the long-term plan is not scenario approached in terms of finances, where are we going to find some scenario approach around finances going forward?
I think the long-term plan, given the 10-year period that it works to, probably can to some degree be a scenario approach. Because depending on what the rate of growth is and therefore how much funding you need over that particular 10-year period, it will look at different ways of funding that. So I think it can actually, in an indirect way, have a scenario approach to the particular decade that you're looking at.
Thank you. Councillor Simpson.
My question was asked on alternative funding. Thank you.
Thank you. Member Leanne Namani.
Kia ora kōrua. Just good to hear that you're going to be working with the IMSB about the engagement engagement process for mana whenua mātāwaka, we think, and no doubt you think too, that there could be improvements from 2012 in that sense, so we're happy about that. Just one question in relation to option 2, which we're relatively comfortable with. Does it, and knowing that there's discussion to go forward, it doesn't preclude the potential for a Māori theme to follow through?
No, not at all. In the workshops, as you would know so far, discussing this, we've come up with 5 themes that we kind of think deal with the big issues that Auckland faces. But that is just a working model, absolutely. As we go through the workshops, that might very well be what comes out of those workshops.
Thank you. Further questions? Members, it's moved and seconded. Just speaking briefly, when I took on the planning chair role, I knew that I was taking on a load because I saw the load that Councillor Hulse had. And I want to acknowledge the Councillor Hulse and those that were here when the Auckland plan was first considered and confirmed. It was an enormous task. It was a marathon, and I think it's a great plan. But much has changed. A lot of the data inputs from that time were well pre-2012. They were relying in many cases on 2008 data inputs and earlier.
2006.
2006, thank you. So here we are, we're in 17, and that plan has done us really well. For the first time in Auckland's history, the first time in New Zealand's history, there is a public body which actually has been following a 30-year vision, a 30-year plan. Gone is the reactive stuff, hopefully. There was a little bit along the way, but so be it. But generally, the council in the interim years has kept a plan. Now we're required by statute not to necessarily review it, but we are bound to have an Auckland plan. It's our responsibility to make sure that is up to date, fit for purpose. And that plan is our strategic direction setting. I consider it personally the highest level plan, the plan that deserves our greatest attention. It is a plan that we can all contribute wisely to ensure that we get wise outcomes for those that follow us and generations that will be following us long after we are all individually forgotten. So it is very important. It is also about how Auckland doesn't just provide for itself, but it's also about Auckland providing to New Zealand and its fit into the balance of the country, and we should not forget that. It is about the spatial arrangements, and there's going to be greater emphasis on that in this plan. It's not just the urban, it's the industrial, it's the rural, etc. It's about critical infrastructure, and infrastructure we probably have not even considered at this time. It's about our open space, it's about our environmental constraints, and I think in this plan there's going to be heightened emphasis on the environmental issues. It's about our heritage, and it's not just our built heritage, it's about our cultural heritage that our IMSB members are rightly reminding us to highlight. And I think that is a shift in the last 6 years, that cultural value has become heightened and needs to be strengthened in this plan. That is what differentiates Auckland from every other city in the world, is our cultural differentiator. So this, of course, this plan gets distilled down into other plans. Out of all those other plans, thread out of this plan. The last document was a very good one, I think, better than very good, but much has changed, and I think Auckland has ballooned and blossomed beyond our wildest beliefs in the last 6 years. We've got an attraction problem, and that is putting pressure on us all. It's putting pressure on those that hold Auckland dear, the ones that are here now, that attraction problem. But it's not for us just to shut the gates. When you've got an attraction problem, you've just got to deal with it. And this plan has got to respond accordingly. The plan, in my view, does lack integration. we can learn from the first plan and make sure it's knitted together across its chapters rather than having chapters standing alone. Meaningful chapters standing alone as they are now, but they need to cross-pollinate. Around the world, much has changed as well, and we all know about the global megatrends that are often mentioned. Technical transformations, technology transformations, a low-carbon future, a throwaway statement, but it is critical that we address what was decided in Paris, what our government signed up to, and what we need to sign up to. Yeah. Otherwise, we are going to put the future generations that follow us in a dire state. So that is going to be a big focus of the Auckland plan. What has also changed as well is there is a deepening desire to have genuine, real localism and community engagement, and that's got to be further expressed and reinforced in this plan. There is competition between cities within New Zealand and our comparator cities across the eastern seaboard of Australia and Asia. And we're probably going to have to consider our place, not just in New Zealand, but also our place in the South Pacific and Southeast Asia. It's got to be a city-centric and responsive plan, and it's got to be a nimble and adaptable plan, because life is changing very, very quickly. And as the Mayor has correctly emphasised, this has got to be a plan that does consider how we fund our future. And that future cannot be funded from a quick reliance on the general property ratepayer. Those days are going. We need to have nimble instruments of funding this city, enduring instruments of funding this city that go well beyond relying on the general ratepayer. So, members, this is not quite the beginning, because we've had three very long and involved workshops on this, but I want to commend the staff. I want to commend all those that have engaged in this to date. But we've got a big journey in front of us, but it's going to go very fast and deliver us an Auckland plan that those 6 years hence can reflect, as we're reflecting now on the 2012 plan, and say that was a good foundation for the last 6 years. Thank you. We will now refresh that plan in, 23. So thanks, members. I hope you can lend support to the recommendation of option 2. Councillor Watson and then Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little more circumspect in terms of what the plan might deliver at the end of this process, and particularly in light of the focus that will be getting directed here, both in terms of cost and staff priorities. Certainly, we're told it's 2.6 to 3.4 million for this process, with the proviso that costs could escalate. I think we were told at one point there'd be 20 staff involved in this, and looking at the timelines from now, it's going to take maybe close to 1.5 years to roll it out. And I guess I come from a slightly more pragmatic point of view, not having been in the governing body from the get-go, but certainly over the last 6 years, I think our council has an unprecedented level of consultation and engagement and publication of plans and policies and strategies and all the rest of it. I understand things have changed since that point. We know that. I mean, you don't have to be a crystal ball gazer to realise that there has been significant changes. I would have hoped that we would have taken account of those, and I think we have across the council. But my real issue goes to the immediacy of our needs now, and to what extent all this will address the central issue of funding. And I know that the comment is made that a refreshed Auckland plan will help build a better understanding of how to plan and fund this level of growth. Well, we're at a position now where we're struggling how to fund the level of growth as it exists now, and we're not getting very far. Now, in between all this investigation and engagement with the community, there's going to be an election towards the end of this year, I think. Before this is completed, there will be the first year of a new government. And my concern, Mr. Chair, is that the sole large focus that goes on this project that we can see jump out at us from these pages, what's going into the election, which surely is going to be far more of a determinant for our immediate to short-term future than the 30-year vision. Certainly at the end of one of the last by-elections, you know, there was a promise of 10 bridges getting built in one part of the country. I don't see too many parties of any persuasion promising too much for Auckland. In fact, there's a deathly silence from all of them. So my concern is that in this all-encompassing focus on this refresh, with all the staff, time and the cost and all the rest of it, the immediate challenge of trying to make a pitch for the election and get something tangible out of that is going to be missed. That's going to be largely overlooked. So I guess what I'm saying in a roundabout way, and it's not to detract from the sentiments that you referred to, Councillor Darby, taking the 30-year view, but I just look at what's happening on the ground now in my ward and all across Auckland, and I don't see how this process is going to help those issues at all. Certainly not for 2, 3, 5 years. We had a community safety and development meeting the other week where we heard some really disturbing revelations about overcrowding in Auckland, you know, and some real subterranean trends that are going on that are not even getting captured in the media. You know, 700 students enrolled at Tuakau for goodness sake, at the start of this year. Now, according to the social agency, the people are enrolling there is because they can't afford to live anywhere in Auckland. They're moving south, so there's goodness knows how many thousand people migrating, like, you know, out of some townships in South Africa or something to try and survive. Now, I think in the absence of something to address that immediate need, especially as it goes to the election, I think we run the danger of, you know, having the lofty vision of the next 30 years, and we lose the major opportunity that we should be focusing on, as that is really putting pressure on for the election. So I look at the last Auckland plan, which was a beautiful document, you know, lovely glossy pages and very enjoyable to read, and said all the right things. I don't know if the next one is going to be any more useful to addressing the immediate short-term future of the next 2 to 3 years, and that's my concern.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Hulse.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. You know, listening to that august group that addressed us in open forum and the very wise words that Richard Didsbury used, and warning us to make sure that we looked at a different possibility for the port future, so that we don't end up investing in stranded infrastructure or stranded assets. This is exactly what this plan delivers. It tells us what, over the next 10 to 20 years, we plan to do with our city. And as a pragmatist, who's been part of this governing body since the beginning, a pragmatist says to me, unless you know where you're going, how do you know what you're going to spend your money on? And with the greatest of respect, if you don't have a clear plan, you waste a truckload of money. We made a decision around this table that I didn't support a few weeks ago to spend the amount of money that this entire process is going to cost us to buy a piece of land with no officer report, no background, and what seemed to be a completely random brain explosion. So, you know, the same budget is being spent on this huge process that will recheck with our community what they expect of us. At the moment, for all the right reasons, we're having a very good look at value for money for how this city's run. I have no problem with that. but you can know the cost of everything and the value of nothing unless you have a very, very clear understanding of where you want to take this city. Mr. Chair, I think your words were wise and they were well spoken. This is the most important piece of work we'll do, because at the moment we're second guessing our community about what we think they think is important. And in the discussions I've been having around the community, they are worried about the environmental future of this city. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about sea level rise. They're worried about the social outcomes that we're getting in the west and the south, and they want to see us address them. They're not particularly absolutely over concerned by maybe an extra dollar here or a dollar there, but they're sure as hell are worried about whether this city is going to be fit for purpose over the next 10 to 20 years. So unless we go back to our communities and have a talk with them, I think we could end up steering it down the wrong path. So finally, Mr. Chair, the first Auckland plan was a little bit like packing for a holiday when you don't quite know the place you're going to. And we've all packed, I'm sure, for holidays, and we've never got below the second layer of clothing. We've taken a whole lot of things just in case. And the first Auckland plan had a lot of just in case in there. So it's well overdue to say, well, we didn't quite need that overcoat and those jumpers and, you know, those extra pairs of jeans. We simply needed the sarong and the bikini. Not in my case, the bikini, I hasten to add, the sensible grandmother swimsuit. But this is our chance to say, and T-shirt, thank you. But this is our chance to say, let's have a, sorry, I'm distracted for a moment there. I know, poking out my mind's eye. But this is our chance to sort of repack that suitcase with a far greater understanding of where we're going, a far greater understanding of what we're going to do when we get there, and a much greater understanding of the issues that are both immediate and future. So I commend the process, and you have my absolute support in your leadership for this. Mr. Chair, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hulse. Councillor Wayne Walker?
Sure. Just want to follow on from my fellow councillor, John Watson, and I'm assuming that questions are over and this is focused on debate now?
We're in debate.
Great. So my issues are around timing and resources and immediacy. And the test for me is what makes the boat go faster, which was the classic mantra of Sir Peter Blake. And right now, this council is in a huge predicament, We don't have the money. We've got growth that we would normally fund by debt, and we cannot do that. So we're really stuck. I could use bolder language than that. We're in a really bad space. It's election year. The public of Auckland, in my view, do not adequately understand the problem, and neither does the government. If I asked somebody in the street, and I explain the problem to them, and I can do that fairly quickly, 9 times out of 10, in fact 10 times out of 10, they haven't got it. They haven't got the picture, and I venture if I took a random sample of one of the MPs down in Parliament, the same thing would apply. And that's bad news. It's really bad news. So what's going to make the boat go faster? What do we need to do now? We need to have coherent arguments around funding. That is absolutely crucial, and we don't have them. We've only got a limited resource within this organisation, and we're trimming it down, and here we're going to take a bundle of resource and we're going to apply it to something that's going to take a couple of years. By then it'll be out of date, and we won't have solved the underlying problems. So I'm at odds with this process. In my view, it's nice to have. I'm happy to have it later and push it out. And when I asked a question at an earlier meeting around timing, the answer I got is, we don't have to do this right now. So I'd like to see some parts of this done, but my issue is around the funding, around the things that need to make the go faster. Otherwise, the boat is basically dead in the water. And my concern is that that's where I see this council going, and that's where it's stuck. It's becalmed. So I'm not happy with this process, and I'm not happy with the process and the information that we as councillors and members of Auckland have had leading up to it.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like Penny, it was really refreshing to see Richard Didsbury back today. To some of you, you may not know that he was one of those that we worked with to establish Competitive Auckland, and we appointed him to the board of Infrastructure Auckland, because Infrastructure Auckland was to provide the seeding funds to get a lot of projects off the ground. So Richard has a long history with trying to see Auckland shaped in a constructive way. My only comment that I will make, and it was a criticism that I had during the original work that was undertaken from 2011 on, and that is, to me, I would like to have seen the long-term plan and the Auckland plan refresh taken concurrently, because for all of the reasons that the Mayor has articulated, for the reasons of the fact that I think Aucklanders are a bit tired of constant consultation and not sort of seeing where it all comes together, it would have seemed more coherent to have actually tried to do those. And that was, you know, Penny steered the Auckland plan through, Councillor Hulse, I should say, extremely well. But she was stymied by virtue of the fact that we were doing these things in isolation. And this is the flaw of local government always, that we're so busy following whatever statutory process we're meant to be in at any time and, you know, running the treadmill, that we actually can lose sight of the objectives. And I do think that this is going to be yet again a problem, that we will do this and then we'll go out for the long-term funding plan next year, whereas if there had been some careful way in which the two could have been done concurrently, I think it would have been more cost effective, but it would have produced a far more enduring and strategic document that Aucklanders were really truly attached to. So yeah, I'm pleased with the decision to go with the option that you have, but I do think it would have been far better to have undertaken it at the same time as the long-term funding plan.
Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. Councillor Hills?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'm supportive of the refreshed plan. I remember when we started off the unitary plan as a local board member, and there were politicians and people who continuously said, we're never going to have that many people coming into Auckland. We don't need intensification. We don't need this to happen. This is all pie in the sky thinking, you know, because we're working on 2006 figures, and now we're ahead of the game. We're losing track already. The plan is a fantastic plan. So much went into it, but it needs to be refreshed. It doesn't make sense on the figures and things we have. Yes, we have an election, but I think how great is it that when the new cabinet or the new government or however it's formed comes in, that we can give them our plan and our priorities, exactly what we need. They all know we need a ton of money. But if we can be very prescriptive and show them the exact way, and that we've got a plan, a structure for them to work with, then I think that's going to be the best case that we can take down to them, and then we can all be speaking from the same tune, hopefully, and fund the important things. I think there is a lot of stuff on this agenda that we are doing that are is going to help out on all the other issues we're doing. I think the Panuku things down in the agenda, the unlock things and stuff in the town centres, is real work that the council is doing that's going to achieve some of the goals we need to do. But I also think that it's really, really crucial that we update the plan and have the facts and figures from, yes, they're going to already be old, from 2013, but if we leave it another year and we get it confused with the long-term plan, then we're not actually going to have the structural things we need to fund the long-term plan and the way to address that. So I think, yes, people are sick of consultation, but it's the way we do it. If we don't do it, then people say we're being undemocratic and we're ignoring them. So I think it's very important that we make it clear what this plan is about, what the long-term plan is about, and actually get this done now. So I think there's been a lot of work done. So I think the staff, it's not easy, but yeah, thank you very much, and keen to vote for this now.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Filipaina.
Thank you, Chair, and I don't carry a bikini in my suitcase when I end up travelling, so no, I don't.
Very, very pleased to hear that, Councillor.
Yeah, I just wanted to put that on the table. But, Chair, page 23, I think, is the key thing for me. Page 23 around option 2, refreshed Auckland plan, and the words that, or the sentences that are clear to me that stick out, meets legislative requirement 2, meets legislative requirement 2, meets legislative requirement 2. That is key to me. And I know it's key to all of us, and I support what is being said around this table, but we have to. And we have to do it, and this is the option for us moving forward is option 2. So just briefly that, Chair, and without repeating what the other councillors have said. So definitely support us moving forward in this, and it has to happen. But just one question to you, Chair, and maybe to our two presenters. Chair, around the alignment with the long-term plan, and that question that was posed, or the comment by Councillor Fletcher, sort of tweaked what brain I have. And that is, we set the 6 years. Originally, we said 6 years. Why can't we then, at some stage during this process, end up setting when the next refresh to align with the long-term plan? That's just a point of, I think, a discussion that needs to happen around this particular table, but I'm just posing it on in this now, if we can. I mean, because I totally agree with what Councillor Fletcher has said around aligning our plans and documents. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Filipino. I think we can address that question as we move forward together.
Awesome.
Thank you, and thank you for the visualisation exercise at the beginning.
Thank you.
No.
I hope I didn't sort of put anybody off there at lunch.
We're all traumatised.
I won't take no right of reply. Thanks for the inputs, members.
Poor Alf.
Oh, sorry, Councillor Simpson last.
I suppose, do I need to start by saying, actually, I do carry a bikini when I go on holiday? Look, I do understand that this is a legislative requirement, and I do understand that government are a key part. And I'm taking on board listening to what Councillor Watson has said, and I wondered whether, as a key stakeholder, which is what central government are, that the March to October phase 2, if that was extended to November, then it would just give whatever new government is there a bit of extra time as a key stakeholder. It just addresses your issue, and I think it might be a bit of a compromise.
Thanks. Look, I thank you for that input. I was not going to take a right of reply, but I think we need to move forward as we are now. We can consider that in our examination as we move forward. Members, just remember, out of 3 years, there's 2 years taken up by either local government elections or central government elections. There's no space for waiting in local government or government. We have a responsibility just to move on with what we've got. It's never a perfect climate. So I will put it to the vote. All those in favour say aye. Aye. Contrary, no. Declare that carried. Aye. Thank you, Jacques, Denise, and look forward to the next episode.